Have you ever lain awake at 3 a.m., listening to the steady rhythm of the person sleeping across from you? That person who knows the PIN code to your phone, the name of your first pet, your deepest fears, and your favorite drink. You look at them and you wonder, you have to wonder, what is the exact down-to-the-cent dollar amount it would take for them to walk away from you, to erase you? We tell ourselves comfortable lies to sleep at night. We say family is a bond that cannot be broken. We say blood is thicker than water. But I am here to tell you that ink is thicker than blood. Once a signature is dry on a deed or a power of attorney, it binds you tighter than any DNA helix ever could. Most people think betrayal is loud. They imagine it as a shouting match in the rain or a slammed door that rattles the frames. But I've spent 20 years auditing the ruins of happy families, peeling back the layers of their tax returns and trust funds, and I can tell you this: betrayal is the quietest thing in the world. It's a signature on a document you were too tired to read. It's a pill dissolved in a glass of water, tasteless and invisible. It's the soft electronic beep of a heart monitor flatlining, while someone in the next room is already logging into your brokerage account to check the balance of your 401k. It happens in the silence. I've seen brothers destroy each other over a vacation home. I've seen wives slowly poison husbands for insurance payouts that wouldn't even cover the mortgage. They didn't do it with a gun. They did it with a pen. My name is Julian Vane. I am a senior forensic auditor specializing in high net worth estate fraud. My office isn't a crime scene with yellow tape. It's a quiet room with a fast computer, a stack of ledgers, and a coffee machine. But the violence I uncover here is just as brutal as any alleyway stabbing. It's the violence of erasure, the violence of looking at a parent and seeing nothing more than an ATM. I don't deal in maybe or he said, she said. I deal in the debris left behind when trust collapses into a pile of ash. I follow the money when it tries to hide in shell companies and offshore trusts. Engage with this channel, echoes of trust and betrayal. Subscribe and turn on notifications, because the stories I'm going to tell you aren't fairy tales. In my world, the truth doesn't just come out, it demands payment with interest. This is the story of the Miller Estate. It is a story of absolute trust, a cold, calculated betrayal, and a loop of karma that was written into the ledger long before the body was even cold. It's a case study in how a legacy can be stolen dollar by the one person who was supposed to protect it. Welcome to the audit.
Let's open the file. To understand the theft, you have to understand the victim. Arthur Miller was 82 years old, a self-made titan who smelled like sawdust and Old Spice. He built Miller Hardware from a single garage into a regional empire. It wasn't one of those soulless big-box stores. It was a place where Arthur knew the name of every contractor in the county. There was a story in town about Arthur. In '98, a contractor broke his leg and couldn't finish a job. Arthur paid the man's hospital bills and finished the roofing himself on a Saturday. That was the man Leo was stealing from. He believed a handshake was a binding contract. But by 2025, Arthur was fading. Dementia is a cruel thief. The first time Arthur forgot where the bathroom was, he cried. It was 2 a.m. He was standing in the hallway, terrified. Leo found him. He didn't hug him. He just said, "See, you can't live alone anymore." The house itself was a character in this tragedy. A 6-bedroom colonial that used to ring with dinner parties. Now it was a mausoleum. The pool was filled with dead leaves. It was a kingdom without a king, and Arthur was just a tenant in his own memory. He had 2 sons. David, the oldest, was a high-powered architect living 3,000 miles away in Chicago. David was the success story, the one who made Arthur proud, but was always too busy to visit. Then there was Leo, the loyal son. Leo was the son who never quite launched. Tech startups, bistros, all failures. Leo's bistro wasn't a failure of the market, it was a failure of character. He bought imported Italian marble tables, but stiffed the dishwashers. Arthur bailed him out. He wrote a check for $200,000 to cover the debts. Leo didn't say thank you. He said, "It's a tax write-off for you anyway." Leo moved back in and fired the cleaning staff to take care of Dad personally. But the control started small. It started at the breakfast table. Arthur liked his coffee black and his eggs over easy. For 40 years, that was his ritual. But Leo started changing it. He'd add milk. He'd scramble the eggs. When Arthur complained, Leo would smile that tight, patient smile and say, "It's better for your digestion, Dad." It wasn't about digestion. It was about conditioning. It was about teaching Arthur that his preferences no longer mattered. Day by day, Leo chipped away at Arthur's autonomy until the old man was asking permission just to open a window. Then there was the roof. The slate tiles were slipping. Water was staining the ceiling in the library. Arthur wanted to fix it. He had the money. He had millions in treasury bonds. But Leo told him, "Dad, cash is tight right now. The market is down. We have to be careful." It was a lie. The market was at an all-time high. But Leo needed Arthur to feel poor. He needed him to feel vulnerable. He wanted Arthur to believe that without Leo's shrewd management, the whole estate would collapse. It was gaslighting on an industrial scale. To the neighbors, Leo was a martyr. They brought him casseroles and pity, but I saw a wolf waiting for the shepherd to fall asleep. The turning point came on a rainy Tuesday in November. The house was cold. Arthur sat at his mahogany desk, his hand trembling. The lawyer Leo hired wasn't the family attorney. It was a strip mall generalist Leo found online, a man who didn't ask questions. He just laid the papers down. Leo slid the document across the polished wood. "Sign here, Dad. It's just for the doctors." Arthur signed a document he couldn't read. A general power of attorney. It was supposed to be for emergencies. Instead, it gave Leo absolute dominion over the Miller fortune. Arthur thought he was signing a safety net. In reality, he was handing his son the keys to his own cage.
It started with a phone call. David called me on a Thursday afternoon. He didn't sound like a high-powered architect. He sounded like a confused son. He was looking at his father's accounts remotely, and the math wasn't adding up. "It's probably just bookkeeping," he told me, his voice tight. "Dad's care is expensive. Maybe I'm missing something." He wasn't missing anything. He was just refusing to see what was right in front of him. I met David the next day at his firm in Chicago. His office had glass walls and a panoramic view of the lake, but David looked small. He was pale, the kind of pale you get from staring at spreadsheets at 4 a.m. He handed me a stack of papers, his hands shaking slightly. He hired me not to catch a thief, but to prove him wrong. He wanted me to tell him that his brother was just bad at math, not bad at being a human being. I flew in that night. I didn't go to the house, not yet. I went to the records. I began my audit with the consolidated cash flow statements going back 3 years. Most people who betray their family are desperate. They steal in jagged, obvious bursts to pay off gambling debts or drug dealers. You see ATM withdrawals at 3 a.m. near casinos. You see jewelry pawned. But Leo wasn't desperate. He was a craftsman. He understood that a large estate is like a lake. If you take a bucket of water out, no one notices the level drop. You have to siphon it from the bottom. I started tracking the expenses. At first glance, it looked legitimate. Groceries, utilities, medical supplies. But then I looked closer at the concierge medical care. It was costing more than a heart transplant every single month. Leo had created a masterpiece of fraud, a shell company called Hearth and Home Wellness. On paper, it was a high-end nursing agency providing 24/7 care for Arthur. It had a website. Leo must have spent a week building it on Wix. It was good. It had stock photos of smiling nurses and elderly people holding hands in a garden. It had a mission statement about dignity and compassion. But he made a mistake. The photo of the chief medical officer wasn't a doctor. It was a stock photo of a model I recognized from a toothpaste commercial. I dug into the corporate filings. The cracks appeared. I traced the wire transfers. Every month, like clockwork, on the first, $15,000 moved from Arthur's personal account to Hearth and Home. It was labeled Specialized Dementia Support. I ran the tax ID number. It didn't belong to a medical group. It belonged to an address 3 towns over. I decided to pay Hearth and Home a visit. I drove out there on a rainy Tuesday. The GPS took me to a strip mall in Hammond. Between a vape shop and a struggling dry cleaner, I found it. There was no medical facility. There was no clinic. Just a pack and ship store. Box number 402. That was the headquarters of the multi-million-dollar care facility. I checked the state licensing board for registered nurses employed by Hearth and Home. There were 0. There were no therapists. There were no nutritionists. There was only one signatory on the bank account, Leo Miller. He wasn't paying for care. He was paying himself a salary for being a son. And the worst part? He was charging overtime.
Chapter 3. The Chemistry of Compliance. I finally walked through the front door of the Miller Estate on a Wednesday. The air inside was heavy. It smelled of lavender air freshener, trying to cover up the scent of stale dust and old paper. The house was silent, but it wasn't peaceful. It was the silence of a held breath. I spent a week sitting in that house, watching them. I became a fixture in the corner, auditing the human interactions just as closely as the bank statements. The control Leo had wasn't just financial, it was chemical. At 2 p.m. every day, the alarm on Leo's digital watch would beep. It wasn't a reminder, it was a command. He would go to the kitchen. I watched him. He would take a small silver cup, a christening cup from his own childhood, and fill it with a mixture of crushed pills and apple juice. The sound of the pestle hitting the mortar was the only noise in the house.
He called it Dad's Vitamins. He would bring it to Arthur in the living room and speak to him in a voice so soft it was almost a lullaby. "Time for your boost, Dad. This will help you think clearly." But it didn't help him think. It did the opposite. I noticed the medicine cabinet in the downstairs bathroom. One afternoon when Leo was outside taking a business call, I opened it. It wasn't a cabinet, it was a pharmacy. Xanax, Valium, Seroquel, prescriptions from 3 different doctors in 3 different counties. I noted the names: Dr. Evans, Dr. Patel, Dr. Weiss. Later, I called Dr. Evans' office pretending to be a pharmacist verifying a refill. "We haven't seen Arthur Miller in 6 months, the receptionist told me. His son picks up the scripts." Leo was doctor shopping. He was curating a cocktail of compliance, keeping the doses high enough to sedate but low enough to avoid an overdose investigation. I followed Leo into the garden one afternoon to hear his business call. He wasn't talking about stocks, he was laughing. "Put 10 grand on the Knicks to cover the spread," he said. He wasn't managing the estate, he was managing his gambling addiction with his father's life savings. And it wasn't just the medicine, it was the lifestyle. Leo claimed to cook, but it wasn't love on the plate, it was microwave dinners. High sodium, high fat. I watched Arthur eat a Salisbury steak that looked like rubber. Arthur was a man who used to wear a tailored suit to breakfast. Now he was in the same stained sweatpants for 3 days running. Leo didn't help him shave, he let the dignity rot away. Mrs. Higgins came by on Thursday with a bundt cake. Leo met her at the door, blocking her view. "Dad's sleeping," he lied. I could see Arthur in the window, wide awake, watching the only friend he had left being turned away. And then there was the moment of lucidity. One morning, before the 2 p.m. dose, Arthur looked at me. His eyes were clear. He grabbed my wrist. "Who are you?" he asked. I told him I was an auditor hired by David. He leaned in, whispering, "Check the safe in the library. I think he changed the combination. I can't get my papers." Before I could answer, Leo walked in with the silver cup. Arthur's hand dropped. The fear returned to his eyes. That night, I tried the safe. It was behind a portrait of Martha. I tried Arthur's birthday. I tried Martha's. Nothing worked. Then I tried Leo's birthday. It clicked open. Inside, it was empty. No will, no deeds. Just dust. Leo hadn't just changed the combination, he had liquidated the history. And then came the emotional poison. Arthur asked me once, "Is David coming for dinner?" He looked hopeful. Leo didn't even look up from his laptop. "David's in Tokyo, Dad. He's closing a deal. He's too busy for us." It was a lie. David was in Chicago, sitting by his phone, waiting for permission to visit. Leo was seeding a garden of resentment in the old man's fading mind, ensuring that even if Arthur did wake up, he would have no one left to trust but his jailer. As I dug deeper into the digital footprint of the house, I realized Leo's betrayal wasn't just financial, it was voyeuristic. It started with a hum, a low-frequency electronic buzz in the guest bedroom that kept me awake. I thought it was the HVAC, but when I scanned the Wi-Fi network on my laptop, I saw something strange. The network had 14 devices connected, 2 phones, 1 laptop, and 11 devices labeled cam_01 through cam_11. There were no visible cameras in the house. I unscrewed the vent cover in the hallway ceiling. There it was, a high-definition lens wired directly into the house's power, blinking a slow, silent red. Leo had installed a military-grade surveillance system, telling Arthur it was a smart home upgrade for his protection. In reality, he had turned the Miller Estate into a panopticon. He had placed microphones in the lamps and cameras in the vents of every room. He wanted to ensure that if David ever called, he could monitor the conversation in real time. He was recording his father's decline like a producer filming a tragedy. I needed to find the storage. I searched the house while Leo was out gambling. The basement was cluttered with boxes of old tax returns and holiday decorations. But in the corner, I noticed a section of drywall that looked too fresh. The paint was a shade lighter. I tapped it. It was hollow. I used a crowbar from Arthur's old workbench to pry it open. Behind the fake wall was a cool, ventilated server room. A black tower was humming in the dark, the lights flickering like a heartbeat. I connected my drive. I found the archive folder on a hidden partition. It contained hundreds of hours of footage. I sat in the dark and watched. It was mundane horror. Hours of Arthur sleeping in his chair, hours of Arthur eating alone. But then I found a folder labeled Funny Moments. My stomach turned. It was a compilation Leo had edited together. Clips of Arthur tripping on the rug, clips of Arthur spilling soup on his shirt, clips of Arthur forgetting his own name. Leo had added a laugh track. He was mocking his father's dementia for an audience of one. I switched to the audio files. Clip 409. Arthur is crying in his bedroom. It's a low, guttural sob of pure loneliness. You can hear Leo in the next room. He doesn't go to him. You hear the sound of a TV volume going up, drowning out the crying with a football game. But then I found the smoking gun, a file named Dad_Confession. It was dated 3 months prior. I clicked play. The video showed Arthur sitting by the window, a rare moment of lucidity breaking through the fog. He looked right at Leo, who was busy on his laptop. "I know the money is moving, Leo," Arthur said. Leo didn't type. He just froze. Arthur continued, "I'm old and I'm tired, but I'm not a fool. I know about the transfers. I just wanted to see if there was a bottom to your greed. I wanted to see if you'd leave me enough for a coffin." Leo turned to the camera, not to his father, and smiled. He didn't answer. He just got up and made another cup of vitamins. As I was watching this, a notification popped up on the server screen. Remote user login, admin_Leo. The screen flickered. He was logging in. He was watching the watcher. I yanked the hard drive out just as the screen went black. I had the evidence, but now he knew I had it. Leo's plan was nearing its liquidation phase. The account balances were bleeding out. The $4 million had been drained down to less than $500,000 in just 18 months. I tracked the sales. First, the beach house in Traverse City went. Sold for cash, 20% under market value, to a shell company in Delaware. Then the 1967 Mustang Shelby, Arthur's pride and joy. The Mustang wasn't just a car. It was the first thing Arthur bought when the business took off. Candy apple red. He used to wash it every Sunday with David. Leo sold it to a private collector in Dubai for $45,000 cash. It was worth $120,000, but Leo needed the money fast to cover a poker debt. He told Arthur it was in the shop for repairs. Arthur asked about that car every single day. "Is she ready yet, Leo? Is the carburetor fixed?" Leo would just nod and say, "Soon, Dad, soon." Leo had already prepared the paperwork to move Arthur into a state-funded facility. I found the brochures on the kitchen counter. Sunset Manor. It sounds nice, doesn't it? I drove out there to see it for myself. The lobby smelled of bleach and despair. The residents were lined up in wheelchairs, staring at a TV that wasn't even turned on. The staff looked overworked and underpaid. It wasn't a home. It was a warehouse for the forgotten. This was where Leo intended to dump the man who had given him everything. But Leo needed one last piece to complete the puzzle. He needed a closer. Enter Eris. Leo found her on a job board for private caregivers. He wanted someone unlicensed, someone desperate. Eris played the part perfectly. She wore scrubs that were slightly too big. She nodded when Leo mansplained medication protocols to her. But Leo missed one critical detail. Eris wasn't desperate. She was a former ICU nurse who had lost her license for whistleblowing on a corrupt doctor. She had a spine of steel and a hatred for bullies. David had found her first. He offered her double what Leo was paying. Her job wasn't to care for Arthur, though she did with a tenderness that broke my heart. Her job was to be a mole. She was wearing a body camera button on her uniform every single day. I met Eris at a diner on Route 41 late one night. She looked tired. She pushed a coffee cup across the table. "He's escalating," she told me. "He's asking about dosage limits. He's Googling lethal limits for geriatric patients on his iPad." Leo had been stockpiling the morphine. He'd pick up the prescription, give Arthur half the dose to keep him compliant, and save the rest in a locked drawer. He was building a lethal weapon, one pill at a time. Leo's instructions to Eris were chilling. "Dad's in a lot of pain," he told her one night in the kitchen. "We need to be compassionate. We need to up the morphine. Let's help him sleep." Arthur wasn't in pain. He wasn't dying. He was just inconvenient. Leo wasn't asking for palliative care. He was asking for assisted erasure. He needed someone to be in the room when the final heavy dose was administered, someone to sign the death certificate so no questions would be asked. He thought he had hired an accomplice. In reality, he had hired the lead witness for the prosecution. I didn't open his ledger. I didn't even look at the receipts for the strip clubs or the Aspen trips. I reached into my briefcase and pulled out a single laminated document. I pushed it across the table, right next to the bottle of Macallan. It wasn't a bank statement. It wasn't an audit report. It was a life insurance policy from Transcontinental Life. Leo glanced at it and scoffed. "I know about the policy, Julian," he said, dismissing it with a wave of his hand. "It's a $10 million term life. I've been paying the premiums for 3 years through Hearth and Home. I'm the sole beneficiary. It's my money." He reached for the paper, but I put my hand over it. "You're right, Leo," I said, leaning in until I could see the sweat beading on his upper lip. "You successfully drained $4 million from the estate. You thought you were stealing Arthur's past. But Arthur was playing a different game. He knew you were stealing. He saw the statements before you intercepted them. He knew he couldn't stop you physically, so he decided to stop you financially." Leo's smirk faltered. "What are you talking about?" "Arthur used your own shell company, Hearth and Home Wellness, to pay the premiums. Every time you thought you were laundering money into your own pocket, you were actually funding this policy. But you didn't read the fine print. I tapped the document. Read Rider B, paragraph 4. Leo squinted at the text. His face changed color. It went from the flush of whiskey to the gray of ash. No, I replied for him. Arthur added a modified Slayer rule clause. Usually this rule prevents a murderer from inheriting from their victim, but Arthur's lawyer added a specific rider for financial elder abuse. It states that if the payer of the policy is found to have committed financial crimes against the insured or contributed to their decline through neglect, the beneficiary status is immediately revoked. Leo stood up, knocking his chair back. That's bullshit. You can't prove abuse. I was a saint. I have 100 neighbors who will testify to that. The insurance company doesn't care about your neighbors, Leo, I said calmly. They care about their bottom line. And they have a rider here that says if the beneficiary is revoked, the entire $10 million payout is diverted to a charitable trust. I paused to let it sink in. The Martha Miller Foundation. It provides legal aid to seniors who have been exploited by their children. Every dollar you stole is going to fund lawyers to hunt down people exactly like you. Leo started pacing, running his hair through his head. He was senile. He didn't know what he was signing. Any judge will see that. I pulled out another document. This is a competency evaluation, dated the day he signed the rider, witnessed by 2 doctors. He was lucid, Leo. He was sharp as a tack. He just played dumb to survive you. I did the math for him. You paid $15,000 a month for 36 months. That's $540,000. You invested $500,000 in your own destruction. That's a negative ROI, Leo. You didn't buy a lottery ticket. You bought the rope for your own hanging.
Leo tried to laugh. It was a wet, jagged sound. You can't prove abuse, he stammered. I was a saint. I have 100 neighbors who will testify to that. I have the receipts. The receipts are fake, Leo, I said softly. And the neighbors only saw what you wanted them to see. But someone else was watching. I reached into my bag and pulled out an iPad Pro. I didn't turn it on immediately. I let it sit there on the desk, a black mirror reflecting Leo's terrified face. You hired Eris because you thought she was desperate. You thought she was simple. But you forgot one thing. People who are invisible see everything. I tapped the screen. The video player loaded. The file name was thefinaldose.mp4. I pressed play. It wasn't a grainy security video from the ceiling. It was a first-person perspective shot from a button camera on Eris's uniform. The quality was 4K. The audio was crystal clear. The timestamp was November 14th, the night before Arthur signed the power of attorney. The video showed Leo standing over Arthur's bed. Arthur looked small, lost in the duvet. Leo was adjusting the pill dispenser. His hands weren't shaking. They were steady, precise. He wasn't giving Arthur his heart medication. He was crushing 3 times the prescribed dose of sedatives into a cup of applesauce. On the video, Leo leaned in close to Arthur's ear. The microphone picked up his whisper. It sounded like dry leaves sliding on concrete. Just a little more, Dad. We're almost at the finish line. Just sign the paper tomorrow, and you can sleep forever. In the office, the color drained from Leo's face. He looked like a man watching his own execution. He realized then that the nurse wasn't just his employee. She was the architect of his prison. She had recorded every dosage, every forged signature, and every moment of cold-blooded calculation. She had 6 months of footage.
Every time Leo laughed at his father's confusion, every time he mocked him to the empty room, it was all there. Leo stopped shaking. He went to the wall safe behind the painting. He spun the dial, his own birthday, and pulled out a stack of cash. "How much, Julian?" he asked, his voice trembling. 50,000? 100? Everyone has a price. Name yours." I looked at the money. It was Arthur's money. "My price is seeing you in handcuffs, Leo." Leo grabbed the iPad and smashed it against the corner of the heavy oak desk. The screen shattered. Glass flew across the room. He hit it again and again until it was just twisted aluminum and wire. He stood there, panting, surrounded by the debris. "There," he said, smiling wildly. "It's gone. No evidence." I slowly pulled my phone out of my pocket. "That was just a screen, Leo. The file is in the cloud. It was emailed to the district attorney at 9 a.m. this morning. And if you listen closely," I pointed to the window. In the distance, the sound of sirens was getting louder. "I think your ride is here."
The police didn't break down the door. They rang the bell. Detective Miller, no relation to the family, was the one who put the cuffs on Leo. Leo didn't fight. He just screamed, "Do you know who I am? I own this town." But he didn't own the town. He didn't even own the shirt on his back. He had bought it with stolen funds. He was wearing his Italian loafers, and I watched him slip on the gravel driveway as they marched him to the cruiser. Mrs. Higgins was watching from her porch. She wasn't smiling, but she wasn't crying either. She just nodded, a silent acknowledgement that balance had been restored. The karma loop was closed. Because the insurance premiums were paid with money Leo had embezzled, the law treated it as a self-incriminating trail. He had literally bought the policy that destroyed him. The trial lasted 3 weeks. Leo's lawyer tried to paint Eris as a gold digger and me as a corporate spy, but the video didn't lie. The receipts didn't lie, and Arthur's shaky signature on the Slayer rider didn't lie. The judge gave him the maximum sentence, 12 years for elder abuse, fraud, and embezzlement. I visited Leo once in county jail before he was transferred. He looked smaller in orange. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a twitchy paranoia. "It was a trap," he hissed at me through the glass. "The old man set me up." I nodded. "Yes, Leo, he did, and you walked right into it because you were looking at the money instead of the man." Leo didn't just lose his freedom, he lost the inheritance. The $10 million payout was triggered immediately upon his conviction. But David didn't get the money either. It went exactly where Arthur intended, into the Martha Miller Foundation. David called me after the verdict. He was crying. Not for the money, he didn't need it. He was crying for the brother he had lost years ago, long before the handcuffs went on. "He saved me, didn't he?" David asked. "Dad saved me from Leo." "I saved everyone," I replied. 6 months later, the first check cleared. It paid for a forensic accountant to help a widow in Detroit whose son had stolen her pension. Arthur Miller died knowing that his loyal son would be the one to pay for his own downfall.
He used his son's greed to fund a legacy of justice for others. He didn't save the money for his family. He used the money to prove who his family really was. In the end, Arthur wasn't the victim. He was the Grand Master. He saw the board, he saw the moves, and he sacrificed his own queen, his own life, to checkmate the king.
I walked out of the Miller Estate for the last time as the police were hauling the filing cabinets away. The house was silent. The panopticon was powered down. The neighbors were still standing on their lawns, confused, wondering how the good son, the one who mowed the lawn and waved every morning, could be in handcuffs. They didn't see the ledger. They didn't see the videos. They only saw the mask. I got into my car and drove away. I watched the house disappear in the rearview mirror. In the gray morning light, the windows looked like hollow eyes. It looked like a skull. I didn't feel triumph. I felt the weight of the ghosts I was leaving behind. Back in my office, the silence was different. It was the clean, cold silence of a closed case. I fed the Miller file into the shredder. One by one, the pages of Arthur's betrayal turned into confetti. The phone rang at 9 a.m. sharp. It was a woman. She was crying. "My son says he needs power of attorney for my surgery," she whispered, "but I'm not having surgery. It starts with a lie. I'll handle the bills, Mom. I'll pick up the mail, Dad. If you hear those words, run." We want to believe that evil looks like a monster. We want to believe it hides in the shadows. But in my experience, evil looks like a dutiful son making breakfast. It looks like a signature on a document. It looks like love. As we end this account, I want you to do something for me. Look at the people you trust. Look at the people who have access to your life and ask yourself, if they had to choose between your heartbeat and your bank balance, which one would they keep? Trust is a beautiful thing, but in the dark, it looks a lot like a target. Don't just kiss your parents goodnight. Check their bank statements. Look at the withdrawal history. Check the deed to the house, because the person stealing their future might be the one sitting at their dinner table. Comment below, is it karma when a man uses his own stolen money to buy the rope for his own hanging, or is it just the perfect audit? Subscribe to Echoes of Trust and Betrayal. Turn on notifications, because in my world, the truth doesn't just come out, it demands interest, and we are just getting started. Next week, we're going to Manhattan. Would you like me to audit the charity that's using orphans as tax shelters, spending 90% of its donations on private jets and galas? Or should we look at the contractor who's building luxury homes with paper foundations that dissolve in the rain? The choice is yours. Welcome to the audit.